Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Once again you join us up at Sunrise Lakes here, just outside Wetherby. And we're hoping to have quite a steady session today. As I say, it's middle of winter, it's freezing cold, and we're just going to see what we can catch in the 6 hours that we've got to fish today. The crux of what we're doing really is just keeping it simple and fishing natural baits. As I say, the conditions are difficult. Temperatures this week haven't really got much above 3 or 4 degrees, so the water temperature's well down. So just going to take some natural baits and see what we can catch, fish for a bit of everything and hopefully try and put a weight together that way. In terms of the bait selection today, we're going to revolve really around red maggots, casters and worms as well. Got a few dead red maggots to put in a bit of ground bait and a few fluoro pinkies just in case it's really hard for the hook bait. Sort of as a change, occasionally double pinky over a bit of caster and ground bait can pick out the odd skimmer, so if it's really hard we've got those just in case. Ground bait wise, we've got a bit mixed up today which I'm going to put on a long line. So put that out of the way. And that's just a 50-50 mix of swim stim red krill and census lake, mixed quite wet to be fair. Like I say, it's a decent depth out there, 6-7 foot, so I want to get it down with plenty of maggots and casters in there as well. Like I say, just create little nuggets and stuff like that, and as I say, just tick over. The way that I'm going to feed it today, as I say, with the temperatures being down, is feed absolutely minimal bait and just sort of ease my way into the session. I'm not going to look to put a cupful in or anything like that, and alongside of that as well, it revolves around how I'm going to fish the peg today, is rotating the lines, just topping up a bit of bait on a line each time, change and then come back to it and hopefully just let the fish settle and try and build a peg rather than try and put a load of bait in and sit on it. So that brings us on to the rigs and what lines I'm going to fish today. I'm going to fish 3 lines, an edge line, a short line with maggots, then a long line over ground bait like I explained. Thinking there is it's deep close in, so there's no point going too far out, so hopefully if I can catch short I want to, I can catch nice and quick and build a weight. And like I say, fishing natural bait is catch a bit of everything. There's no point shipping out to 16 metres if you're fishing for sort of small roach and little skimmers and stuff like that. So start short, and like I say, try and build a weight nice and quick. My short line, like I say, is just going to be at the bottom of the near shelf, and as it turns out I only have to fish a top kit to get there. And I've set up two rigs for that line. So on that line my plan is I'm going to start on it just to see if there's a few fish short initially, flick a few maggots in and just see where it goes from there while I let my other lines settle. So I've got set up 2 rigs like I do with most of my lines here, 1 light and 1 heavy, just in case there's a few fish there. So both the rigs, solid number 6 at the top, set nice and pingy, a Dacron connector and a nice short line again, because we're fishing close in, I want to be nice and quick on those bites, especially if they're F1s. The main line in this case on both rigs is 011 Guru N-gauge. I've just got a Chianti and a 4x12s on one and a 4x14s on the other. Nice thick bristle but dotted nicely down so I can see any little indication off the F1s and small roach and things like that. Shotting wise, strung bulks on both of them, and again on the lighter rig number 11s is shot because obviously a lighter float you can get a slightly better registration with smaller shot on a thinner bristle on that. And then with the heavier rig 4x14s number 10s, again a bigger shot registers better on a thicker bristle. So on the heavier rig as well, I've just got those spaced out a little bit less, so about a centimetre and a half apart. On the light rig about sort of 20mm, something like that. And then down to the hook lengths on both rigs, e95 suplex fluorocarbon, an 18 silverfish maggot on one and a 20 on the other, on the lighter rig. Like I say, just giving me options so I can fish a nice light rig if there's plenty of roach there. But if I think there's a better fish in the peg, I'm getting played by lots of bites, I can put the 4x14s on and bomb the bait down and fish a bit more positive. So that's the maggot line looked at. Just get these rigs popped out of the way. Right, and then that brings us on to the ground bait line. Again, exactly the same principle, 2 rigs over that line, and I'm going to fish that at about 10.5 metres, something like that, well out into the lake, into the deepest water I can find, where it's nice and level, and really there I'm looking for skimmers, maybe a few F1s and roach, but the crux of that line, it's going to be caster fishing really, a nice inert bait, so if there's lots of small fish there, especially when you're feeding ground bait, it can be a problem. A caster fished over the top can just be nice and inert and sit there and wait for a better fish. So with that in line, with mentioning that brings on to the rigs. I'm using bulk rigs, nice and heavy and positive, and just going to sit over the top of that ground bait. With these rigs I want to get the bait down and keep it nice and still, as I say, looking for skimmers. So again, both rigs pretty much same in the construction, just the capacity of the float and the shotting that's different. Double 4 elastic at the top end. Again, probably my favourite elastic for all-round fishing where you're not sure what you're going to hook. With puller kits you can get pretty much anything out on an elastic like that. E95 main lines, as always. On both rigs, we'll put it on this one, the back shot above the float's crucial, and a couple of number 9s above the float as well as heavy back shot, just to keep the rig nice and stable. The float choice is a Sensor Jean-Francois, nice wire stem, a fairly thick fibre bristle, so perfect for registering decent shot and showing lift bites. I must admit, in terms of still water fishing, probably my favourite float for catching sort of roach and skimmers. Moving down the rig, as I say, one's different to the other in the capacity. One's a 0.4 and the other's a 0.6. So on the 0.4, bulk and 3 droppers, number 10s as droppers, 0.10 hook length again to a size 18 silverfish match hook. On the other, if I'm fishing for skimmers, this is what I'm going to use. A nice heavy bulk, and I've basically double bulked this rig, so 3 number 10s above the hook length. The hook length's again 6 inches of e95, and I'm going to fish this about 5 inches over depth, so that second bulk will be just off bottom to register lift bites and things like that. And hook choice, again, is a silverfish match, but in this case in a size 16, more for sort of double caster and 2 or 3 dead red maggots. Again, that's the line that I'm going to feed initially and then leave for about an hour before I have a look on it and just let it settle and top it up really with sort of nuggets of ground bait. That's my plan. So hopefully that's a line that we can build as the day goes on and sort of leave it for periods of time without it sort of fizzling to nothing really. The longer we leave that, hopefully we should get a few fish settling on it. And then finally, my edge line. This is going to be for fishing chopworm and caster towards the stick-ups. I've got same depth left and right, so it's worth plumbing up just in case I have to move between the two. And exactly the same again, 2 rigs, one nice and positive, one quite light. Double 6 and double 5 of the elastic, so the heavier on the heavier capacity float. Same again with back shot to make sure I can hold the float nice and tight to the features. And in this case I've got an AS4 in 0.4 on the heavier rig, and an AS3 slimmer pattern float in a 0.3 on the lighter rig. On the heavier rig I'm going to basically lower the bait down and let it sit. On the lighter rig I'm going to lay it in against the shelf. Again, just a couple of options on presentation, especially if I decide to loose feed caster. The AS3 rig is much better for that. These floats, nice hollow bristles as well, and I'm going to dot those right down so they lend themselves to fishing over depth down the edge. In terms of the shotting, both shotted nice and positive, number 9s, strung bulk, nice and tight on the AS4 positive rig, and on the other, again, strung bulk, number 9s, but even, sorry, on the AS3, more strung out. On the AS4, much tighter bulk on there. Hook lengths, E11, main line's E13 for that, and both have a B911 for the hook. On the lighter rig an 18, and on the heavier a 16 for pieces of worm. As I say, the crux of it's just covering all my options today and making sure that I can chop and change and just sort of feel my way into the session and pick fish off using different forms of presentation, just feeding little bits of bait. And like I say, we'll see how the session goes, so we'll crack on now, get the lines fed and start fishing. Right, so we're now ready to start the session and feed the peg. First thing I'm going to do is start flicking just a couple of maggots, barely going to feed anything, 5 or 6, just in front of me for that top kit line. I'm going to feed twice and then just leave it to try and keep the fish down. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to put in 1 ball of the ground bait mix, full of casters and a few dead red maggots long. Like I say, in summer I might put 3-4 balls in, but today I'm just going to put 1 ball in and leave it. So I'm putting plenty of particles in there, so there's not as much ground bait, purely to try and make sure that the small fish don't come into the peg in quite enough numbers, and equally making sure a nice inert ground bait as well. Just line up with a far bank marker, and just pop the ball in. Then the final line to feed is my edge line. So it's not something that you'd normally do, is feed your edge line from the off, but because I'm going to rotate all the lines and I want to give them time to settle, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to feed just about half a pot or so of chopped dendrobinas with the soil in, just to make sure they can bind together and get down there, and just with a few casters as well. One thing I'm not going to do as well is chop the worms too fine, purely because I want to try and catch some better quality fish down there, and like I say, try and detract the small fish from the peg, because it's something you can get a problem with is small perch and roach, especially when you're fishing chopped worms. So about sort of 3/4 of an inch pieces are about right, and just a few casters. Right, and that's the peg fed. So hopefully by feeding those maggots first and then going on to the rest of the lines, if we're lucky, we'll drop in and hopefully get a bite quite quickly. I'm going to start with the 4x12s rigged nice and light, like I say, strung 11s, so a really nice light presentation, and just see what we can catch. So I've got these rigs, or this rig, sorry, set about 1 inch over depth. When it comes to maggot fishing, I don't think there's any virtue in fishing dead depth. 1 inch over depth just lets the maggot sit there, and like I say, gives you a bit more chance of getting proper indications. So I'm just swinging the rig out and then just letting it fall in against the shelf. On the 4x14s rig, I've got the rig set about 2 inch, maybe 3 inches over depth. Again, same principle, just letting it sit and settle. Again, it might be the case that we don't get a great deal of activity straight away and we have to build the peg, but hopefully the peg will just get stronger and stronger as the day goes on, rather than putting a load of bait in and ruin it straight away from the off. Just feeding tiny pinches of bait and just trying to build a peg steadily, I think this time of year is the way to go. Right, so a quick update as to what's gone on in the first half hour, 40 minutes of the session. I've had one bite on the shot line and it's just not really happened, so I've replumbed and moved it a section further out and added cad pots to that. I've just refed that line with about 10 maggots. Judging by how the session is, it's incredibly difficult, so I'm 50-50 whether that short line will really come good, but it's one line that could come good in the end of the day, so we'll keep it fed. And I'm just going to have a go now on that long line. As I say, about half an hour, 40 minutes in, that ball of ground bait should have settled and broken down, so I'm just going to put on a couple of fluoro pinkies on the lightest rig with a size 20 and just see if there's anything down there. Again, a 0.4 rig should just about be heavy enough in this depth of water, but as I say, by covering my options, I've got a 0.6 if the wind does pick up any more. So I'm just waiting for that bulk to swing under the float and then just dropping it in. Like I say, with a couple of fluoro pinkies, it's not selective at all, so whatever's down there, you know, we can get a bite off. So whether it's small roach or F1s or whatever it might be. Right, there's a fish on now on the long line. Shot off, so it could well be a little F1 this. Again, just on double pinky. Fishing nice and light. And here's a small F1. Again, like a little block of ice this. It's taking the bait really nice and confidently. We're off the mark. Nice little fish to start with, that. I think it is the case today that need to be fishing sort of towards more the middle of the lake rather than close in. Right, so I've just rebaited now. I'm going to go and ship back out and see if we can get another one of these F1s. Judging by the fact I've not had too many indications, I do suspect it's going to be a day where we're just going to be looking to catch pretty much F1s. I don't think the silverfish are going to play ball, which is a bit of a shame really. So hoping natural baits like we're fishing today to try and get a bit of a mixed bag, but it's looking like it's going to be F1s or bust really. Again, having to dot the floats right down because it's F1s, they're barely moving with the bait, so fishing the tiniest bit of bristle can get away with. Just making sure I'm seeing every indication. Right, and there's another fish on now. Again, tiniest little bites that we're getting. And it feels like another F1 this. Again, this one, tiny little bite, hooked right in the corner of the mouth. Again, really nice little fish to catch these. Good weight builders as well. With the bites being so gentle, I've actually got the float overshot, so I'm just using a little bit of bristle grease just to keep it above the surface. Like I say, I think if we get another fish, what I'm going to do is refeed with a little nugget and just try and keep that swim topped up. Because it looks like there's a few fish down there. It's just a case of trying to hit the bites and making sure you're not foul hooking any. So with that in mind, if there's a lot of fish down there, you don't want to be laying the rigging over the top, so I'm swinging the rig out, letting the bulk come underneath the float about a foot, with the float about 1.5 foot, 2 foot above the water, and then just lowering it down. And then just sort of lifting the float just to make sure it just about catches the surface film to sit up, but I've got it shotted down to next to nothing now. Right, there's another fish on straight away now. I suspect this is another one of these little F1s. Again, just as that bait's touched bottom, the float's just dipped a little and, like I say, into a fish straight away. There we go, another little ghost F1 hooked right in the top lip perfectly. Like I say, as soon as I've dotted the float down that little bit more and taken about 5 mil off the depth, it's made a world of difference. And started hitting more of these bites. Getting popped in the next is a bit lively. And it's looking like that line over the ground bait is definitely going to be the way to go today. Just keeping that topped up with the odd little nugget to ground bait, a few casters, few dead reds, and just fishing either a single live red or a couple of fluoro pinkies over the top. But there's certainly no shortage of fish out there. I think at the moment the crux of it is just making sure we're hitting the bites. So exactly the same, lifting the rig up, then just lowering it in, making sure it's all in line with that far bank marker. Then looking for indications straight away. That was one immediately. Again, by using nice heavy droppers in relation to the thickness of the bristle, like these number 10s for what is, you know, medium thickness fibre bristle, you do get nice positive registrations on the float, rather than fishing like 11s or 12s down the line. Another little indication there. Number 10, once it's dislodged, get nice little reading on the float. And I think the other thing that would make a big difference today is fishing a much shorter hook length as well, because of how little the fish are moving. When they do pick up the bait, the closer you can get that shot to the hook, the better your registration will be when the fish picks up the bait. It's not something I thought I'd have to carry today, is 4-inch hook length, so just going to sit it out with a 6-inch and just make do as it currently stands. But I think after the next fish, what I am going to do is put in a little nugget and just top it up, just to see if I can keep those fish coming. Again, we're only catching still off that initial ball that I put in, so I think just putting a little nugget in, creating a bit of activity and competition for a small amount of bait, I think that'll spur the fish into feeding even more, and like I say, hopefully get some more positive bites. There's a little indication there. Tiny little movements on the float. Just going to lift the float up by about 6 inches and lower the bait back in. Again, when there's F1s in your peg, lifting and dropping like that can be, a little indication there, can be very effective. Right, there's another fish on now. So I think after this one we've caught quite a lot over that original feed. So I think it'll be time to just put in a little nugget and top up. I think sort of feed every 5 or 6 fish today might well be the way to go. Another little F1. Again, one of the smaller ones of the day, but say when it's barely 1 or 2 degrees, it's nice just to get a few bites. Another small fish, but getting popped in the net. Like I say, I'm going to put in a little nugget of ground bait full of casters and dead reds, and hopefully that'll keep the fish interested and bring a few bigger fish into the peg if we're lucky. Right, there's another fish on now. Again, this feels like another F1, tiny little indication. But like I say, I think it shows just how important it is to fish a really fine bristle float, a decent sized dropper, and have it dotted right down. Because the bites today, the float's barely moved. And even at times with a couple of mil of bristle out the water, it's not actually taking the float fully under. There's another chunky little F1. Again, you can see him well down in the water with it being so clear. Again, really chunky fish these. Probably £1.5 pounds, maybe 2, that one. Like I say, it doesn't take long when you're catching fish of this stamp to build a weight this time of year. Get another lovely little F1, so we'll get him popped in the net. Right, so we're about halfway through the session now and things have started to dry up on that long line. One thing that's happened is I've noticed that the fish are sort of coming a bit less frequently. The bites have sort of tailed off a little bit and they're being quite finicky. So what I've decided to do is open a new line just past where I've fed using the same rigs, and all I'm going to do is just feed it with a tiny little golf ball size of the mix that I fed earlier, just to see if the fish have backed off. One thing that you can get with F1s quite often is when you've caught a few, the show will spook and start to move away from you. So I've just gone a section further out, directly past where I fed that initial line, and hopefully with a little top up like that to concentrate the fish in one area, we might get them feeding again. So now just fishing at 11.5 metres. Just line up with a far bank marker, slowly tip the ball in. Now the other thing I'm going to do, because of that area of the peg where we've been catching seems so consistent, it seems that's where the bulk of the fish are, I'm also going to put in a maggot line down there, just off to the left, a bit shorter this time, but in the same depth of water, so I can use the same rigs, and just feed that with a small pot of maggots, maybe 10 or 15 maggots, that's all I'm going to feed there, and just leave that, and then it gives me somewhere to drop onto as well. Still been feeding that short line, but as yet we've not had anything down there, and I suspect again bankside disturbance, things like that, and I suspect also the fish want to be in the deepest water, so that's why I'm opening my second line in the track as well. So I've got two areas to cover where I'm happy that the fish are going to sit. So those two lines are the lines I'm going to concentrate on now until the last hour, when I'm going to bring the edge line back into play. Again, I've dropped onto that a couple of times, not had a bite on it as yet. So I think it's something that I'll leave till the last hour, and like I say, when the light levels start to drop, hopefully we'll get one or two fish on it. What I'm going to do now is just put on a single red maggot on the same rig, that 0.4 sensors float, size 20 hook, and just see if one or two fish are already over that ground bait that I've just fed. Again, if it's a case that they've backed off the initial line that I fed and they're already there, then hopefully we should get one straight away. Right, so there's our first fish across now. Well, say across, the extra section further out, just past where we've fed. Again, it's taken all of about sort of 3-4 minutes for us to get a bite out there. So it shows us there's some fish at least that are backed off to that area, away, like I say, away from where we initially had our line out there. Feels like a decent fish this as well. Another one of these F1s. Again, similar sort of stamp to the rest that we were catching earlier. Like I say, just by moving that bit further out, I've had a bite pretty quickly. So get him unhooked, we'll get him popped in the net. So hopefully now, because we've just put in a tiny little amount of bait, we should start to catch a few quite quickly, and then we'll see if we have to top up out there. But ideally, one thing that I've decided to do today from what I've done earlier when I topped up is I think it killed the peg a little bit, so I'm going to try and fish this ball out that I fed out there, rather than topping up and risking spooking them. And all I'm going to do is keep that maggot swim to the left of it ticking over by feeding sort of 10 maggots every 10 or 15 minutes till I can get that going. And hopefully if we get those two swims working nicely, then we can sort of rotate between the two and keep ticking over without sort of plunging one line too much. Right, there's a fish on now. Nice positive little dink on the float, and it feels like another F1. So getting a couple of indications as well outside of hooking this fish over there as well, which tells me that they've come to that bait quite quickly, and there's a few of them there. Getting up right in the top lip. Another nice little F1. So like I said, all I'm going to do is just fish that little nugget of ground bait out until I can't get another bite there. Then I'll either think about topping up or moving. And that's probably the best way to go today. Again, the other thing that's apparent as well while I've been fishing over this little nugget of ground bait is accuracy. My float's sort of 6-10 inches to the left of where I've put that bait in. I don't seem to get a bite as quick. There we go. Right, and there's another one on now. I've had to wait a little longer for that bite, probably sort of 4 or 5 minutes or so. Looks like a little skimmer this actually. Be a bit of a change. Might be an F1 though. No, it's a nice skimmer. It's a bit of a change from what I've been catching today. Again, nice skimmer, just about, probably about a pound, maybe a bit less. Again, barely hooks right in the top lip, that one, but a lovely little fish to catch. So what I think we'll do now is we'll just crack on, fish this line along with that maggot line. I might put a little nugget of ground bait in there as well, seeing as that it seems like it's working quite well, and just rotate those two until it comes to the last hour, when we'll probably have a look down the edge and see if we can get out there. But like I say, we'll crack on now and see if we can put a few more fish in the net. Right, so time for a quick update. We've got about an hour left of the session now, and in the interim time between this little update now and the previous time we spoke to camera, it's been quite steady, to be fair. We've had a decent run of F1s, a few skimmers, we've had a roach and a little perch as well, and it's just basically been a case of rotating these two lines out long, just topping up with a little nugget of ground bait every so often. I think I've put, that was a bite there, I've put 2 on this line here and in total for top up, and just one on the left. Like I say, that's just been enough to keep things ticking over, catching the odd fish off each line and picking off 1 or 2 and then moving to the other and giving them time to settle back there again. As the session's gone on as well, the fishing's picked up a bit. Since sort of 2 o'clock onwards, the fishing's been much better. Like I say, we've managed to put a few fish together. I don't think it's going to be a massive bag of fish, but when the temperatures today haven't got above sort of 1 or 2 degrees really, it's not bad going at all. There's another fish on now. And pretty much the story today has been using natural baits and just feeding just enough to get the fish in your peg. Too much and obviously can quickly knacker your peg, because although there's a lot of fish there, there's not a lot of fish feeding, so you pretty much ruin your chances of hooking many fish because they've got too many options. So just by feeding little nuggets of ground bait quite infrequently, we've managed to catch a nice run of fish. That's a nice little F1, that one. And as I say, I had some great sport and put a decent little weight together. You can see how barely hooked he is. Incredible how delicate the bites have been today. One thing we've also had as well in the time off camera, like I say, is a decent run of a few skimmers. Just after one of the top ups, it was really strange. On both lines we had an arrival of skimmers, sort of caught 5 or 10 across each line, and didn't expect them to feed today, to be fair, and it was nice to catch them up to sort of a pound or so. So it's been interesting from that point of view, although today really what we did, the plan was anyway, to come down here with natural baits and try and catch a mixed bag of silvers and a few F1s and see what we could get going. But being that the roach haven't really fed and the skimmers have only turned up like in a short spell, it's just been a case of ticking over and feeding it for the F1s. And I think today, if I was purely going for the F1s, I could have done quite well dobbing bread against the far bank here. I think that'd have been fantastic. It's a perfect peg for it with all the rushes you can see and a decent depth off them as well. But with natural baits, in terms of how we've approached it today, feeding those 2 lines long has been by far the best. Loose feeding maggots has been, well, we've caught nothing on them unfortunately. But just feeding balls of sort of 50-50 fish meal and lake with a few casters, or full of casters but with a few dead reds in it, just seems to have really worked, to be fair. Like I say, kept fish coming all day. One thing I've also done, being that it's the last hour, I've fed my edge lines just in case with half a pot of chopped worm and caster. Again, we didn't fed them at the start, but it just didn't happen for us on those lines. Another fish on now. So through the mid pass today, I decided to leave it and just concentrate on fishing these ground bait lines. This could be a skimmer, this actually, and it is another one of these small skimmers. But hopefully in the last hour, like I was saying with the edge lines, it might be the case that we might catch 1 or 2 fish down there just to finish up on. But pretty much every single fish that we've caught today has been from one of these 2 ground bait lines. I think a big point to take as well is where I fed initially. I put a big ball in and fed it, you know, quite heavily really for skimmers and for roach, and sort of like how you would if you're attacking it for bream really, putting a bed of bait down and leaving it to settle. And I think from the off, I think that was probably the wrong thing to do. If I'd have fed a little nugget and fished how I am now, I think I could have caught pretty much straight away and kept the fish coming all day from that area of the peg. But quite a big thing to do was to move a section past that area of feed and put in a little nugget, and that's where I've caught the most fish out of in this peg today. Is just a section past where I initially fed. Like I say, just putting in a little nugget to catch those fish that are backed off that initial feed. It's kept fish coming for the past sort of 3 hours or so, which, say, on a day like this you can't really complain with. Plenty of bites, and as I've mentioned, a few skimmers on there as well. And just by opening that other line to the left and giving myself an option to rotate when I top up one, go on the other, or I've caught a few fish and I think they've spooked off one, move on to the other line, it's meant that I could keep catching pretty much consistently. Again, we've had to wait a while for bites at times, but when we have caught, it's been in spells of 3 or 4 fish, and then, like I say, that's another indication of fish on. Could be a skimmer, this. Here's another small skimmer. So just rotating the lines, it's amazing what you can catch by the end of the day. Again, these skimmers don't weigh a massive amount compared to the F1s, but it's always nice to catch a mixture of fish. So what I'm going to do now, I think, is try that left-hand line. Looks like the skimmers have turned up on this one, but just to see if, by leaving that other left-hand line to settle a little, or the left-hand line, sorry, of the 2, to settle a little bit longer after topping up, on my last top up, just to see if the F1s have settled there, and whether it's been a case that a rig has spooked them. Then it won't be long as well before I have a look on those margin lines, just to see for 5-10 minutes if anything's turned up there. Something I've also done as well is tried the 0.6 rig over these 2 lines, and it just doesn't seem to have worked quite as well as the 0.4. I think there's a bit too much resistance on it for the fish. That was a bite there as well. I think a 0.4 has been just about perfect today, but it's always worth having a heavier rig set up just in case. So although the wind's been quite strong today, it's not been sort of gale force where I've needed a float like that, but it has been there just in case I needed it. had quite a few sort of daft indications as well today, and I think a lot of that's the line bites from F1s. Especially when it's this cold, they might just sit, say, a foot or 2 foot off bottom, and I think they can occasionally brush into your rig and disturb the shot, giving you a false indication. But when you're fishing fine floats like this, just so you can see the proper bites, you end up striking at a lot of those and obviously not connecting with fish. Right, so there's another fish now on that line across. This could be another skimmer, this. Actually no, it's shot off now, it may well be an F1. I think what we'll probably do is call this the last fish on the ground bait lines before trying the edge. Just see if we can finish off with 1 or 2 fish, possibly of a better stamp from the edge line. Again, it's 50-50 whether they'll turn up down there, with it being that cold and clear. Another nice little, so this is a little common carp, this one. Lovely scale pattern on him, but that's another change fish, not an F1 this time. Let's get him popped in the net. It's only small, but get a nice little change. And I think what we'll do now, we'll have a look down the edge and just see if there's 1 or 2 fish down there to be caught. Right, so unfortunately we've not had a bite down the edge there. Again, it's like I said, it's just one of those things. This time of year it's 50-50 whether they're down there, but always worth a shot. So I'm going to go back across, like I say, because we've only got a few minutes left of our 6 hours. Give it a go across and just see if we can get 1 more fish to end on before we have a look at the net. So again, back on the 0.4 rig, which has caught pretty much every fish today. Again, occasionally you have days where you'll need all your rigs to go through them and chop and change, but today this rig and this way presenting a bait has by far been the best. So single red maggot again. We've had a couple of fish on the double pinky and triple pinky today, but single red maggot's been by far the best bait. On the pinky it was a lot of sort of false indications, and I think it's quite a light bait, so especially when there's a couple of F1s in the peg, it can get wafted around a bit. The single red maggot's a bit heavier and just sits there. So there's a bite and another fish straight away. And I think what we'll do, we'll call this the last one of the session. Again, feels like another nice fish. Surprising how hard some of these fish are fighting considering the water temperatures. So double 4 elastic's perfect this time of year for these fish. Just one pull on the elastic takes enough off them to net them quite easily, and the hook's just dropped out in the net. So there's another lovely little F1 from Sunrise, and I think he'll be the last fish of the session, so we'll get him in the net and have a look at what we've caught. Right, so as you can see, there's our final net of fish. 32 pound 12 of F1s mainly, a few skimmers, 1 roach, 1 perch somewhere in there as well. So not the mixed bag that we're aiming for today, but still a cracking net of fish on a day where it's like I say, the temperature's barely got above 1 or 2 degrees and the water temperature's absolutely arctic. Like I say, I think the other week this lake had a lid on it as well, it was frozen, so it gives you an idea of just how cold it is. So a bag like that, you can't complain. As I say, I don't think I've got the most out of the peg today that I could have done, but being that we brought some natural baits, didn't really bring bread and stuff like that, and expanders and all that kind of stuff, I think we've done really well. And like I say, feeding little nuggets of ground bait with a few casting and just fishing a single red maggot over the top's been the way to go today. Rotating the lines a little bit, like I say, not the short line so much and the edge lines, but 2 long lines, and say kept fish coming all day and put a nice bag of fish together. So a brilliant day's fishing. I think if I came back tomorrow, the only thing I'd do from the office, set those 2 long lines up, feed a nugget on each and just fish those out, and probably dog bread. I think if you did that tomorrow, probably double the weight in the net. But as I say, fantastic day's fishing here at Sunrise Lakes, and we've really enjoyed it. So as always, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.